Welcome to Election Judge Training for the 2024 Presidential Nomination Primary. Whether you're a returning election judge or new to the process, we welcome you to working with us this year and we're grateful for your service as an election judge. In this training, we'll help you fully understand the presidential nomination primary process and how to best serve voters on Election Day. As always, your thoughtful service as an election judge ensures the best voting experience for all. Our training will cover an overview of the presidential nomination primary process, which we also call PNP, a history, a purpose of the process, what selection of a presidential candidate nominee through this process means, and what's happening with partisan caucuses now. We'll talk about requirements on Election Day, working with voters through the party selection process, questions about changing party or how party selection is recorded or used, and where and how to file any concerns or complaints. Finally, we'll talk about after Election Day, what happens with the party data that's recorded, and then what other elections are there in 2024? Before we get started, take a moment to think. Did you work for the last PNP? Or did you vote in it? What do you remember about it? Let's take a moment to grab a pen and paper. And then let's jot some ideas about some things you remember about the last PNP election, experiences you might have had with voters or as a voter, or questions you had then about this new process. Then write down what are some questions you're having for this year. And then please keep track during this training. Do I answer those questions by the end? We're going to take a few minutes to jot these ideas down, these questions, and then we'll return to our training. Ahead of each U.S. general election, major political parties select one individual each to compete for the office of president. Candidates for president are chosen through two different systems in the United States. Caucuses, meetings run by political parties. Some caucuses choose candidates by secret ballot. Others require participants to divide themselves into groups according to the candidate they support or by undecided. At the end, the number of delegates given to each candidate is based on the number of caucus votes they received. And primaries. Primary voters choose their preferred candidate anonymously by casting secret ballots. The state where the primary is held takes the results of the vote into account to award delegates to the winners. Both accomplish the same task of selecting delegates to represent their states at the party's national convention. The main difference is who administers the processes. Caucuses are run by political parties and primaries are run by the states. Caucuses were the original method for selecting a candidate for president, but most states now hold primaries because there's higher turnout for primaries. The state pays for it rather than the parties, and elections administrators manage the process like all other elections, but there are a few distinctions to the process and the results, which vary by state. In the US, there are technically two main types of primaries: open primaries and closed primaries. In a closed primary, only registered party members are able to vote in their own party's primary. For example, a voter registered as a Democrat can vote only in the Democratic primary, and a Republican can only vote in a Republican primary. Whereas in an open primary, anyone can cast a ballot without declaring party affiliation. Because voters do not register by political party in Minnesota, this primary is not considered a closed primary. Minnesota differs from other states' primary processes because voters are required to select a major participating political party in order to receive a ballot. In 2024, all three major political parties in Minnesota, the Democratic Farmer-Labor Party, the Legal Marijuana Now Party, and the Republican Party, have submitted lists of candidates to the Office of the Secretary of State to participate in Minnesota's presidential nomination primary. In addition to official candidates listed, the ballot may contain the option for uncommitted delegates. The voter selects a party to support, but not a specific candidate within that party. Uncommitted delegates are not bound to a specific candidate at the national convention. Or write-in candidates. On general election and PNP ballots, voters always have the option of writing in a name instead of voting for one of the candidates named on the ballot. However, write-in candidates for some offices need to file a request to have votes for them counted. Write-in candidates must notify the party chair by February 23rd if they would like to be counted. Then the state party chair must notify the Secretary of State no later than the 7th day before the primary of the names of any write-in candidates in order for them to be counted. Before official presidential nominees from each state are declared the official candidates for the November presidential general election, the parties will each hold a national convention where delegates from each state meet to pledge their votes for the candidate. Based on the process of Minnesota's presidential nomination primary, the party must commit to the results of the voters' selections. So, delegates for the official winning nominee will be submitted to this national convention process from Minnesota. Again, this process will vary by state, so understanding how the process works in Minnesota may help you as you work on Election Day, assisting voters in the questions on the process. But as always, remain nonpartisan in your discussions with voters and refer them to their political parties for any other questions about party matters of delegation and caucuses. The legislature chose the process of a presidential nomination primary in part due to record high 2016 caucus attendance for president. In 2016, over 321,000 Minnesotans participated in the caucuses. And while this signaled increasingly high voter turnout to select presidential nominees, when the first presidential nomination primary in nearly 30 years was held in March 2020, over 873,000 Minnesotans voted. Partisan caucuses will still be held 1 week before the PNP on Tuesday, February 27th. Voters can contact the parties for results of the caucuses. A PNP is a partisan primary in which only presidential candidates are nominated, while August primaries may contain many partisan or local offices. In a PNP, voters provide their party selection in order to receive a specific ballot, that is, a separate ballot for each party. Whereas in state and local primaries, voters in each precinct will receive the same ballot, and they are instructed to only vote within one party throughout the ballot. So we've covered the meaning of a PNP and the history of it in Minnesota. Now we'll shift to talking about Election Day. What's different, and what can you expect? Before polls open, election judges must ensure signs are posted related to the presidential primary. If you've worked August primaries before, you'll be familiar with the Notice to Primary Voters sign that you must post. There's a notice to PNP voter sign in your materials, as well as an instruction for PNP voter sign. These must be posted by the entrance to the polling place along with sample ballots for each party. You will also need to post privacy statements at your poll books where voters will need to see the information before making their party selection. Before voting, election law requires that you select which major political party's ballot you want. If you refuse to select one party's ballot, you cannot vote. Your choice of major political party will not be public information, except that it will be made available to election officials and to the chair of the major political party that you select after the presidential primary. As we always advise, election judges should also be aware of all of the best practices to protect voter privacy throughout the voting process. Provide private spaces throughout. Conceal voter information. Turn the screens of poll pads away from other voters. Keep voter receipts face down. As an election judge, you must keep a voter's party choice private. Do not announce or indicate party choice at any point. Because the major political party choice of a voter has been deemed private by state law, willful disclosure before, during, and after Election Day of a voter's major political party ballot choice to anyone other than those authorized by law is a crime. As an illustration of the process, we'll show a voter traveling through the polling place and discuss election judge roles at each station. Here the voter enters the polling place and is welcomed by the greeter judge, whose main role is to greet and guide voters while they enter the polling location, inform them about requirements of the election, including party choice for this election, guide voters to the posted sample ballots and other materials, direct most questions to the informational posters or other handouts or the head judge, and assist with any initial requests for curbside voting. The greeter judge is especially important because they are the first to assist in the process of informing voters about the specific requirement of this election. They will point out the 3 separate party ballots if voters would like to inspect them, and encourage voters to read the PNP specific posters or review with them. They'll also field additional questions or consult the head judge before encouraging voters to proceed through the process. The greeter judge will guide voters to the poll book station next. Poll book judges check in registered and non-registered voters. They might refer voters to correct polling places if needed. And during their process, they'll also reiterate the requirement for the voter to choose a party selection as they check in a voter. They may need to refer voters back to the sample ballots if the voter is unsure about their party choice. They'll instruct the voter to sign and mark the party choice themselves on the poll pad. They'll cover and conceal any private information, especially party choice. Here are 2 demonstrations of how a poll pad judge will process first a registered voter, then a non-registered voter through the PNP process. Voters will be looking at the screen and making the party selection themselves during this process. There is no need for them to verbalize their party selection. After check-in is complete, the voter then receives a ballot receipt with party preference information printed on it to give to the ballot judge. If a voter does not wish to select party preference, they may not vote in the PNP. You can notify your head judge if you need any additional support explaining this to voters. After the voter receives their ballot receipt with their party selection listed on it, the poll pad judge directs them to the ballot and demonstration judges. This judge or judges will receive the ballot receipts for voters in exchange for a party ballot. They'll explain that there are separate party ballots, but do not indicate to anyone else which party the voter is requesting. They'll manage ballots in a way that doesn't make it obvious which type is being given to a voter. They'll keep the ballots and receipts concealed from view of other voters. And they'll maintain clean organization of one ballot pile for each of the major political parties throughout the day. Ballot and demonstration judges may receive questions and can explain write-in choice if on a party's ballot, uncommitted choice if on a party's ballot, and they can explain the difference between a PNP, a state primary, and a general election ballot. General note, ballots, either voted, unused, or spoiled, and voter receipts do not need to be stored or tracked by party. We're now going to show some images of an example ballot to illustrate some of the important differences of a PNP ballot. Title and party name specific ballots, and the ballot is only one-sided. PNP specific instructions to voters. Party name and office of president in just one column. Uncommitted option may be rotated with the candidate names. Write-in option is at the bottom of the options, like a typical ballot. After a ballot judge provides the correct ballot to a voter, they should encourage every voter to confirm that they have the correct ballot before going to the booth and voting. If the voter would like to change the party they selected at this point, they may, but election judges must first record this change on the party preference change log, so the party can be corrected by Hennepin County after the election. Election judges should then spoil the ballot given to the voter before providing them a new one. Ballot judges must again be careful to confirm the voter's correct political party preference once more before issuing this exchanged ballot, and encourage the voter to confirm the correct ballot before going to the booth to vote. While the request to change party after checking in was uncommon in the 2020 primary, it may still occur. Only 353 party preference changes were requested for the entire county for the 2020 PNP, 142 in Minneapolis precincts. Finally, as always, the head judge will support all judges as questions or concerns arise in the polling place, including supporting judges as they affirm the party choice requirement and managing voters who've refused to provide party choice. A couple of other scenarios that may come up that a head judge may facilitate are curbside voters. Election judges from different roles may be supporting curbside voting, which depends on political party balance. To administer curbside voting, follow the curbside voting instructions in your polling place guide for the general process requirements. For the PNP, we'll want to explain the party choice requirement before getting too far and checking a voter in on the poll pad if they don't understand. We'll We'll be sure to conceal PNP ballot receipts as you retrieve the ballot from the polling place. And we'll be sure to deliver only the ballot noted on the receipt. All the judges should double check to be sure. Challengers. The only action an authorized challenger may take is to contest a voter's eligibility. Suspicion is not a basis for making a challenge. The challenger must personally know that a person is not eligible to vote for a specific reason. During the PNP, a challenger cannot challenge a party choice or make a list of voters. If voters do complain about the PNP's party choice requirement, offer additional explanation that this is a legal requirement. The legislature chose this process. If they'd like to lodge their complaint, offer the state election law complaint form. There should be extra paper copies included with the supplies, just in case. Party choice becomes part of a voter's vote history. These data are classified as private data on individuals and are not available as part of a registered voter list. These data are only accessible to election officials and the political party the voter selects. You all and voters may continue to hear national news the rest of the year about party matters and conventions. Contact the parties for more details on how the national party delegation process works. But you now know how Minnesota voters select their presidential party nominees. In addition to the nominee from each party for president, what else is on the general election day ballot in 2024? U.S. Senator, U.S. Representative, State Representative, and judicial seats, along with other local elections. So then what would be on the August ballot? If a primary is necessary, local elections, if they are primary possible, U.S. Senator, U.S. Representative, State Representative, and judicial seats. Reach out to your city with any questions about your assignment and work on Election Day. If you have any questions about training or other resources or elections in general, you can reach out to your city or access resources at Hennepin County or the Office of the Secretary of State. Thank you for the time you took today to learn about the presidential nomination primary process and your service to voters. We could not hold successful elections without you. Take a moment and look back at your notes from the beginning of the training. Did your questions get answered? Did you think of any more questions as you listened? Did you learn anything new from this last section? Please take a few minutes to jot those ideas down, those questions. You've also been provided with a knowledge check as part of this training, so you can see how well you gathered the information we presented here, as well as all of the signs and documents and PNP supplemental guides, so you can continue reading and reviewing if you want to know more before Election Day. We hope you learned a lot in this training, and we hope you have a lot of fun and an interesting election year. Thank you so much for serving as an election judge with us.